Welcome all brothers and sisters in Christ to Soulful Scriptures Everyday. It is a blessing to be back with you, gathering around the table, or maybe you're in the car or out for a walk, but wherever you are, we are gathering to look at the world through the lens of faith, truth, and the complex, often messy reality of our human walk.
It's so good to be here. And you're right, it's often messy. You know, we spend so much of our time in the Word, looking back at the early church, the journeys of Paul, these foundational stories.
Right, we look at history.
We do. But today we're looking at something that feels like it's ripped from history, but it's happening right now. It really challenges our modern understanding of community, of obedience, and I think how easily the path can get obscured.
Exactly. This isn't an ancient text we're dusting off. This is a news story, a current event. We're going to be doing a deep dive into a source article from El País, the Spanish newspaper.
Okay.
It's by Eleanor Giovio, and the title just grabs you. The Rebel Nuns of Belorado, Schism and Imminent Eviction.
Oh, it almost sounds like the title of a novel, doesn't it? A thriller.
It really does. When I first read it, I honestly checked the date. I thought, is this an April Fool's joke? Because the details are just so out there.
But it is all too real. And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, isn't just to report the news. Because we're missionaries, we can't help but look at this through the lens of the body of Christ.
Yes.
And the thing about the body is, when one part hurts, or when one part tries to, sever itself, we all feel it. We have to.
That's our mission today. We're going to explore this heartbreaking, unbelievably complex situation in Spain. You have a convent of Poor Clares nuns who have completely, formally cut themselves off from the Catholic Church.
And this isn't just a small disagreement. We're not talking about, a strongly worded letter.
No, we are talking formal excommunication, a standoff with the Vatican itself. There are allegations of illicit gold sales, lawsuits, riot police. It's a community that has barricaded itself into total isolation.
It's intense.
And the question for us, the question we really want to explore is, how does this happen? How does a spiritual disagreement, something that should be handled with prayer and counsel, escalate into this? A catastrophe.
How does a house of prayer, a place that is literally built for silence and contemplation, turn into a fortress of resistance?
That's the core of it. And as we get into the details, and believe me, some of them are truly bizarre and sad, we just want to hold in our hearts that the enemy loves division. He loves to scatter the flock. So this isn't just about legal drama.
No, it's a spiritual crisis. It's about pride. It's about authority. And as we'll see, it's about the very vulnerable people who always get caught in the middle of these things.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
So let's set the scene. I really want you, if you can, to picture this. Unless you're driving, of course. Please don't close your eyes if you're driving.
Chuckles, please don't.
But just transport yourself to the province of Burgos in northern Spain.
It's a beautiful part of the world. So much history, very deep, very old Christian roots there.
Absolutely. And in this province is the monastery of St. Clare of Belorado. It's this massive, imposing 15th century complex. And when you think of a place like that, a Poor Clare convent, you expect a certain feeling.
A sense of peace,
right?
A sense of holiness. You might expect a heavy wooden door that opens to charity, maybe the smell of bread or sweets baking.
The architecture of these places is intentional. It's meant to be a bridge between heaven and earth. It's supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where the noise of the world stops and you can actually hear the voice of God.
But not here. Not anymore.
Not anymore. If you walk up to the entrance of the Belorado Monastery today, the visual language is it's completely changed. The first thing you see is not a scripture verse. It's not a welcome sign. It's a harsh metal sign. And it reads, private property, no trespassing.
Wow. That is jarring. That's a worldly defense, right? It's a legal statement, not a spiritual one. It's a keep out sign, not a come in.
It's a wall.
Yeah.
And it gets worse. The main gate is locked up tight. And there's another sign hanging below it that says, if you wish for assistance, please call this number. It's so bureaucratic, it's cold.
It sounds like a restricted government facility or something, not a house of God.
Exactly. But then you look at the side door, and there's graffiti. Someone has spray painted, occupy and resist.
Occupy and resist? I mean, that's the language of political revolution. That's squatters' rights, an anarchist slogan. To see that scrawled on the walls of a convent.
What did that tell you?
It tells you the identity of the people inside has fundamentally shifted. They no longer see themselves as a sanctuary. They see themselves as a fortress under siege.
And it's not just them. The townspeople, the community of Belorado, they've reacted with anger. The article mentions that about 100 meters away On this huge wall, someone has scrawled a really crude message. I'm not going to use the exact language, it's too coarse, but it basically says, considering the little time I have left in the convent, I might as well take a dump in it.
Oh my goodness. That's the level of animosity we're talking about. The sanctity of the place in the public eye has been completely eroded. When your neighbors are writing vulgarities on the walls about your home.
The relationship has collapsed. It's gone.
Totally.
And here's the detail that, for me, just gave me chills. It's almost too perfect, like a metaphor written by a novelist. It's the geography. The monastery is physically located between two roads.
Okay.
One is Camino Manchas, which means Nun Road. The other is Camino del Matadero.
Slaughterhouse Road.
Slaughterhouse Road.
You cannot make that up.
You just can't. Caught between the path of the nun and the path of the slaughterhouse.
It's a physical manifestation of the spiritual choice they're facing. I mean, which path are you on? The path of your vocation, the path of the nun? Or are you walking into spiritual destruction, the slaughterhouse?
It feels like a crossroads in a parable. And right now, with the locked gates and the graffiti and the anger, it really feels like they are walking down the wrong road.
It certainly seems that way.
So that's the visual. A place that should be holy ground is now, for all intents and purposes, a battleground. And the stakes, they could not be higher. We're talking excommunication, a standoff with the Vatican, these allegations of selling gold.
And a looming eviction date. March 12th, that's coming up very, very fast. The clock is ticking.
Extremely fast. So the question we have to wrestle with today, and I want you to keep this in your mind as we go through the timeline, how does a cloistered life, a life dedicated to silence and prayer, turn into this? A barricaded resistance involving civil lawsuits and eventually the civil guard, the police.
To understand that, you have to go back to the moment it all broke, the Great Rupture.
Let's do that. Let's unpack Section 1. The Great Rupture. It all exploded publicly on May 13, 2024. And this wasn't a slow drift. This was a door slamming shut. The nuns announced publicly that they were breaking with the Roman Catholic Church.
And in the Catholic tradition, that is the nuclear option. It's called schism. And the immediate automatic ecclesiastical consequence is excommunication.
Can you break that down? What does excommunication actually mean for a nun?
It means you are cut off. You're cut off from the sacraments, from the community, from the body of the church. For a nun whose entire existence is structured around the Mass, around the Eucharist, it is the spiritual equivalent of death. It's a terrifying, monumental step to take.
To explain themselves, they released this document. They called it the Catholic Manifesto. And this thing is a beast. It's 70 pages long.
70 pages. They really did the paperwork.
They did. And when you dig into what it actually says, it's a classic argument from a particular theological stream.
Yes, it's what's known as a sedevacantist argument.
Okay, that's a big word. Let's pause there. Sedevacantist. What does that mean? What were they arguing in these 70 pages?
It comes from the Latin sedevacante, which literally means the seat is empty. The core of their argument is that the papal seat, the chair of Peter, has been vacant for decades because the popes have been heretics.
So they're not just disagreeing with a policy.
Not at all. They claim to have reached an empirical conclusion that every doctrine of the Church that has come out since the Second Vatican Council is invalid.
So the Second Vatican Council, that was in the 1960s.
Yeah.
We're talking about 60 years of church teaching, of councils, of encyclicals.
All of it gone. In their view, it's all heresy. They are essentially rolling the clock back to the 1950s and saying, this is where the true church stopped, and we are the ones holding on to it.
So they deny the authority of every pope since then. John Paul II, Benedict VI.
All of them. And they explicitly, in this manifesto, declare the current pope, Pope Francis, a heretic.
I mean, calling the pope a heretic, if you're a Catholic nun, that's the end of the conversation. There's no coming back from that easily. It is a total rejection of the entire structure of authority.
It is. You're saying the man the entire world recognizes as the leader of your faith is an imposter. And once you believe that, you believe the current church is a false church. You believe the sacraments celebrated in your local parish are probably invalid. You have to isolate yourself because you believe you're the only one left holding on to the true faith.
But this is where the story takes a turn from, a theological dispute into something much stranger. Usually when a group breaks away, they might become independent or try to form their own thing.
Right.
But these nuns didn't just become independent. They immediately placed themselves under the authority of a very specific and, frankly, very controversial figure.
Yes. A man named Pablo de Rojas Sanchez Franco.
Tell us about this guy. Who is he? He seems to be a central character in this whole tragedy.
He's a very flamboyant and, I think, tragic figure in his own right. He himself was excommunicated from the Catholic Church back in 2019. He leads a small fringe group he founded called the Pious Union of St. Paul the Apostle.
So he was already on the outside.
Very much so. And if you see pictures of him, he presents himself as a sort of archbishop. He dresses in these incredibly elaborate pre-Vatican II vestments, lots of lace, tall mitres. It's all very theatrical.
So he looks the part of a traditional old-school bishop.
He definitely cultivates the image, but he has zero authority from Rome. In fact, Rome and other religious experts who have studied his group don't just call it traditionalist. They use a much heavier word.
Yep,
They call it a sect.
A sect, wow. That implies something different. That implies manipulation, high control.
Isolation, a charismatic leader who demands total loyalty.
Yeah, yes.
So the nuns didn't just leave the church. They immediately submitted themselves to the authority of an excommunicated sect leader.
And this is what just breaks my heart. At the core of monastic life is a vow of obedience. And obedience can be a beautiful, freeing thing when it's directed toward God and through healthy, accountable leadership. It's about humility.
Right.
But here, they just transferred their obedience. They took it away from the church and gave it wholesale to this one man, Pablo de Rojas.
It's a classic displacement of authority. I think human beings are designed to follow. We are sheep. We're looking for a shepherd. And if we reject the good shepherd or the shepherds he has appointed through the church, we very rarely become truly free. We usually just find a harsher master.
That's a powerful way to put it.
And that really seems to be what's happened here. They thought they were escaping the perceived heresy of modern Rome, but they walked straight into the cage of a sect.
Which brings up the big question, why? Why then? Why May 13th, 2024? Did all 16 of these women just have a simultaneous theological awakening? Did they all finish reading the Vatican II documents on the same day and say, nope, we're out?
Chuckles, it seems unlikely.
Or was there something else going on, something more worldly? And that brings us to section 2, the catalyst. Because when you look at the timing of this whole affair, it is deeply suspicious.
The timing is the key that unlocks so much of this story. To understand it, we have to look at the leader of the convent, Abbess Isabel. She was the Mother Superior.
Right, Abbess Isabel. And she had been in charge for a very, very long time.
She was just finishing her 4th term as abbess. Now, in the rules of most Catholic orders, there are term limits for leadership positions, and there's a good reason for that.
To stop power from becoming too consolidated in one person?
Exactly. It keeps things healthy. It promotes humility. You serve for a time, and then you step back into the community, you wash the dishes again, you let someone else lead.
So she was at the end of her 4th term.
Yes. And, crucially, her term had already been extended twice by the Holy See, by the Vatican. That is the absolute maximum allowed. There are no more extensions. Her term was set to expire at the end of May 2024.
The end of May.
Legally, according to the laws of her own order, she could not be reelected. She had to step down.
Okay, let's just look at the calendar here. Her term, her authority, expires at the end of May. The schism, the 70-page manifesto, the dramatic break, all announced on May 13th.
Just a couple of weeks before she would have been legally required to hand over power.
That's not a coincidence you can ignore.
It's very difficult to see it as a coincidence. It reframes the whole thing. Suddenly it looks less like a crisis of faith and more like a power play, a coup.
It raises that awful question. Was this really about dogma? Or was it about dominion? Was this about preserving the true faith? Or was it about preserving her own position of power?
Think about it. If she steps down, she becomes just another sister in the convent, taking orders from a new abbess. But if she breaks away and declares her convent independent...
She remains the abbess, indefinitely.
She answers to no one except her new bishop, this Rojas character, who, by the way, desperately needs her and her historic monastery to lend his fringe movement some credibility. They need each other.
And the way she did it, it just reinforces this idea. It wasn't some democratic, prayerful process within the community. We know this because of the testimony of a sister who got out, a woman named Sister Amparo.
Her story is it's like a scene from a movie, and we have to honor her courage.
Absolutely. She stood up. What did she say happened?
She recounts that there was no consensus. There was no discussion. Abbess Isabel claimed in the manifesto that she was signing it on behalf of all 16 nuns. But Sister Amparo says she never consulted them, especially not the elderly nuns.
Just imagine that for a second. You've taken vows, you're living this quiet life of prayer, maybe you're in the kitchen, making their famous chocolates, and we'll get to the chocolates. That's a whole other layer to this.
Mm.
And one day, your boss just signs a legal document declaring that all of you think the Pope is a heretic, and you're leaving the church, and you had no idea it was coming.
It's an incredible violation of trust in community. Sister Amparo says the nuns were all summoned to a meeting on May 12th. That's one day before the public announcement.
So not to discuss it, it was already a done deal.
It was a done deal. They weren't called to debate theology. They were called, she says, to meet their new bishop. Pablo de Rojas was there.
The audacity of that. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Surprise. Here's your new leader.
And that's the moment Sister Amparo stood up. In the middle of this meeting, with the abbess there, with this new charismatic leader in his fancy robes, surrounded by what must have been immense peer pressure, she stood up.
And what did she say?
She declared, "My only bishop is the Archbishop of Burgos," who was, their legitimate bishop.
Wow.
Wow.
Talk about it. Here I stand. I can do no other moment.
Yeah.
That takes a level of courage that is hard to comprehend.
It really does. It takes a profound spiritual anchor to stand against your entire community, your leader, your sisters, for what you know is right.
And what was the response? Did they try to reason with her? Did they say, "Sister, let's pray about this"?
No. She was asked to leave the convent immediately.
She was cast out for being faithful to her vows.
Yes.
That one detail tells you everything you need to know about the atmosphere inside that building.
Mm.
This wasn't a search for truth. If it were, they would have engaged with her, debated her, tried to convince her.
Right. It was a demand for compliance. You're either with us or you're against us. And if you're against us, you're out.
And this brings us to what is, for me, the most disturbing and frankly infuriating part of this entire story. Sister Amparo had the strength, the youth, the clarity of mind to stand up and walk out. But she wasn't the only one in there who hadn't signed up for this rebellion.
No, she wasn't. And this is section 3, the vulnerable. This is the part that, as missionaries, should make our blood boil. Because our first calling is to protect the least of these. And we have to look at who is actually in that convent.
So there were 16 nuns originally.
16, yes.
Yes.
Sister Amparo leaves, so that leaves 15. But of those 15 who remained, 5 were elderly. And when the article says elderly, it is not exaggerating. We are talking about women between the ages of 87 and 100 years old. 100
years old, a woman who was born during World War I. These are women who have given their entire lives, decades and decades and decades, to prayer within the church. They probably entered that convent before the Second Vatican Council even happened.
Exactly. They're likely frail, some almost certainly suffering from dementia, or just the profound confusion that can come with extreme old age.
And these 5 elderly sisters did not ratify this decision.
How could they? They likely didn't even understand what was happening. A 70-page theological manifesto, it would have been meaningless to them.
And yet, the abbess used them. She counted them in her rebellion. She went public saying, "The 16 of us are united," when 5 of them were, in all likelihood, completely unaware. She used them as props.
It is exploitation. There's no other word for it. And it got so bad that the Civil Guard, the National Police Force, had to mount what the article calls a rescue operation to get these 5 elderly nuns out of the convent.
A rescue from a convent. And it took 3 attempts. Why 3? Why didn't they just let their families come and get them?
Because the rebel nuns wouldn't let them leave. They were physically blocking access. They were keeping these elderly, non-consenting women inside, presumably to keep their numbers up.
That is horrifying.
There's a quote from the niece of one of the elderly nuns. She said, flat out, "It was impossible for the 5 older nuns to agree. They were not capable."
She goes on to say the environment was like a cult.
Yes. That niece said she was forbidden from visiting her own aunt. Can you imagine that? Your 90-something-year-old aunt is inside. You know something is terribly wrong. You know in your heart she is not part of this. And you are barred at the gate by the very women who are supposed to be her caregivers.
What do the rebels say about this?
They claim it's all lies. They say the stories of them mistreating or manipulating the elderly are just media fabrications. But the facts speak for themselves. The police had to intervene. The families were sounding the alarm. It happened.
It brings to mind that verse in James. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress. It's the absolute baseline of our faith.
Yes.
And here you have a group claiming to be preserving the true faith, the purest form of the faith, and they are allegedly holding the most vulnerable among them hostage to bolster their rebellion.
It is the absolute antithesis of the shepherd's heart. The good shepherd leaves the 99 to go after the one lost sheep. He carries the weak lamb on his shoulders.
He doesn't use the weak lamb as a sandbag for his barricade.
That's a powerful and accurate image. using the lambs as barricades. That is exactly what this feels like. It's a deep spiritual and ethical failure. You cannot make a life-altering spiritual decision on behalf of someone who lacks the mental capacity to consent. You can't excommunicate a 100-year-old woman with dementia by proxy. The idea is grotesque.
So eventually, after 3 attempts, the civil guard gets these 5 elderly sisters out. They are now safe, we have to hope, with family or another church facility.
Thank God for that.
So that leaves the core group. The rebellion is now down to its hardliners. The article says there are only 7 rebels remaining, Abbess Isabel and 6 other sisters, Sion, Barrett, Paloma, Belen, Israel, and Elma.
7 women in that massive 15th century building, all alone.
7 women against the world, and they are facing a world of trouble. Which brings us to Section 4, the legal and financial quagmire. Because this is the part people sometimes forget. When you step outside the church, you don't just lose the sacraments. You lose the entire legal and financial framework that supports you.
This is where the heavenly ideals crash into earthly reality. The church's position, legally, is crystal clear. Canon law, the church's internal legal system, says if you are expelled from consecrated life, which they have been, you lose any legal status you had in that monastery.
So you can't be on the board of directors anymore, so to speak.
Exactly. And the Vatican appointed the local Archbishop Mario Aiceta as the pontifical commissioner. That's a fancy term, but basically, he's now the legal guardian of the property. He holds the keys. He's the trustee.
He's legally responsible for the building, the bank accounts, the assets, everything.
Right. But the nuns are playing a different game now. They're making a civil argument. They're saying, hey, this is Spain, not the Vatican City. We're not governed by canon law. Their argument is that they are now just a civil association.
Like a club.
Exactly. We're just a group of women who live together in a house we happen to own, and the archbishop has no jurisdiction over our private property.
It's sort of the franchise argument, right? It's like saying, we're keeping the McDonald's building and the sign, but we're going to sell tacos now, and corporate headquarters can't stop us.
That's a surprisingly good analogy, actually. And the government's response was basically, no, you can't do that. They tried to formally register as a new civil association with the Ministry of the Interior.
And what happened?
They were denied. The government deferred to the archdiocese's report, which laid out the legal ownership. The state essentially said, this property is inextricably tied to the Catholic Church as an entity. You can't just squat in a historic monastery and declare it your private clubhouse.
And then, of course, there's the money. You always, always have to follow the money. And the financial situation of this convent under Abbess Isabel, well, it was a mess.
A mess is putting it very, very politely. When the archdiocese was finally able to get a look at the books, or what passed for them, they found a complete disaster. There was a massive deficit. The Federation of Poor Clares, that's the network of other healthy convents, had to immediately deposit 450,000 euros.
€500,000 almost.
Just to cover the shortfalls, to pay the bills.
How does that even happen? I thought nuns took a vow of poverty. I thought they lived simply. Where did all the money go?
Well, their legitimate income streams had dried up. They were famous in the area for their truffle and chocolate workshop. People loved their sweets. It was good business. But it closed in May of 2023.
A full year before the schism.
A full year. So they had no major legitimate income for 12 months.
So what were they doing for money? How are they paying for food, electricity, building maintenance?
According to the investigation, dog breeding.
Dog breeding. In a 15th century monastery.
Yes. And apparently it wasn't a very well-run operation. The article mentions they had been previously investigated or fined for it, suggesting it was illegal, or at least not up to code. So they were breeding and selling dogs. And now they say they rely on that and support from families.
But the financial story gets even darker than that. It's not just about mismanagement. There are allegations of illicit activities, specifically gold.
A lot of gold. The archdiocese uncovered an investigation into the sale of 1.7 kilograms of gold.
Wait, 1.7 kilos? That's almost 4 pounds of gold. Where does a small convent of nuns get 4 pounds of gold? Are we talking like actual gold bars?
That is the $1 million, or rather the 121,000 question. That's what they sold it for. Where did it come from? Was it historic artifacts from the monastery chalices, crucifixes that they melted down? Was it from donors? Was it being hidden? We don't know. But there's also a previous investigation on the books for misappropriation of cultural heritage.
It paints a picture, doesn't it? A pattern. financial distress, shutting down the legitimate business, turning to questionable activities like dog breeding, and then right before the break, liquidating a massive, mysterious asset like gold.
It really looks like they were cashing out. Sell everything that isn't nailed down because we're about to burn the bridge.
And speaking of burning bridges, the cast of characters they tried to bring in to replace the church hierarchy it's just bizarre.
Oh, this part is almost comic, if it weren't so tragic. So they have their new bishop, Rojas, but they need a priest, right? Someone to actually perform the liturgy, say the Mass.
So who they get? Surely there's a traditionalist priest somewhere who would join them.
Well, they sort of held auditions, it seems. A few people came through, and get this cast of characters. First, there was a priest who, before being a priest, used to be a bartender in Bilbao.
Okay, a bartender.
Then there was an Argentinian man who was described as a boxing expert.
A boxing expert.
And finally, a man from Valencia who claimed to be a priest, but who had been illegally ordained.
A bartender, a boxer, and a fake priest walk into a convent. I mean, it sounds like the setup to a terrible joke.
It really does. But it shows the spiritual vacuum that's created when you cut yourself off from legitimate authority. You don't get purity and holiness, you get chaos. You attract opportunists, fringe figures, people who are looking for a place to feel important or to hide.
It's a stark reminder that when you sever the root of the tree, the fruit goes bad very, very quickly. You lose the structure, the history, the discernment of the wider body that protects you from these kinds of absurdities.
Precisely. The church, for all its human flaws, has 2,000 years of systems. It has checks and balances. It has vetting processes for clergy. When you throw all of that out the window because you think you know better, you end up with a boxing expert leading worship.
Unbelievable. Now, let's look at how they're dealing with the world outside those walls. This is Section 5, the siege mentality and the media war. Because this isn't happening in a bubble. They are online. They are trying to fight a PR battle.
And they are, but in a very strange way, they launched a website. And the URL is almost heartbreaking in its directness. queremosinconvento.com.
Which translates to wewantaconvent.com.
Yes. They know the eviction for Belorado is coming, so they are publicly appealing for money and for a new location. They're asking people to help them find empty expanses of rural Spain. They are trying to crowdsource a new fortress before the old one falls.
But at the same time, they're asking the public for help online. They are completely rejecting any dialogue or help from the actual people who are showing up at their door.
This shows the hardening of their hearts. The Archbishop's representatives, the ones now legally in charge, tried to visit. And they weren't coming with eviction notices at that point. They were coming to check on their basic needs.
What do you mean?
They wanted to bring diapers for the elderly nuns who were still inside at the time. They wanted to bring food, medicine. It was a basic humanitarian mission.
And what happened?
The nuns called the civil guard and had them kicked off the property.
They called the police on the people who were bringing them diapers.
Yes, it's a level of spiritual blindness that is difficult to fathom. They refuse any face-to-face contact. They told the archdiocese they will only communicate via email.
And what do they email them about? Are they sending their theological treatises?
No. They email them traffic tickets that need to be paid and other unpaid bills from the monastery.
Wait. So they send the bills to the very archbishop they have publicly declared a heretic and whose authority they reject. And they expect him to pay their bills.
That's it, exactly. It's this bizarre combination of defiance and entitlement. You have no spiritual authority over us. You are an agent of a false church. But please pay our electric bill. It reveals a profound immaturity. They want the freedom of rebellion with none of the responsibility.
And their relationship with the media is just as hostile.
Mm-hmm.
The journalist from El Paches who wrote the article, she tried to get their side of the story.
Right. She called something like 20 times. Finally, a nun called her back. But she refused to be interviewed. She just said that the media traps them and that El Pas isn't aligned with our views.
Which, okay, El Pas is a major secular newspaper, so that's probably true. But where did the nun direct her for information?
To their Instagram account, she said, "We speak out there."
It is the perfect encapsulation of the modern echo chamber. I will not speak to a professional journalist who will ask difficult questions. I will only broadcast my curated version of the truth on my social media channel where I can delete the comments I don't like.
It's just wild to see a cloistered, supposedly pre-modern religious order adopt the absolute worst habits of 21st century online culture. The us versus them mentality, the cries of fake news. The nun literally told the reporter regarding the allegations, it's all a lie.
Even the part about the elderly nuns. the police rescue.
All a lie, she said. But it's a matter of public record. The Civil Guard issued statements. The families spoke out. You can't just gaslight the entire country when the police had to physically intervene at your front door.
So the clock is ticking. The eviction date is March 12th. The legal road has run out.
And law enforcement is on standby. The article makes it clear that if they don't leave peacefully, it could become a forceful eviction.
Where will they even go? Did they find one of these empty expanses of rural Spain from their website?
It doesn't seem so. The one potential location that is mentioned is a place called Orduña. It's another old monastery building, but the description is it's bleak.
How so?
It's described as abandoned, broken windows, muddy animal pens where pigs used to be kept. One of the doorbells is hanging off the wall by its wires. It's a ruin. It doesn't sound habitable.
So they are trading this beautiful, historic, functional monastery of Belorado for a derelict building with broken windows and pig pens.
That seems to be the end of this road. And even their own lawyer, the person fighting for them, admits the toll it's taking. He's quoted saying he doesn't know how they withstand the pressure. He uses words like discouragement and struggle. Even their own team seems to see the hopelessness of it all. They are marching defiantly towards a cliff.
It's just relentless downward spiral. And as we move towards our final thoughts here, I just want to sit with the immense sadness of it all.
It is a tragedy. There's just no other word that fits. It is a profound spiritual tragedy.
You have this group of women, whatever their flaws, they originally entered that convent seeking holiness. They gave up marriage, careers, the world to pray. And now they are facing homelessness, legal ruin, and a complete spiritual isolation of their own making.
They're barricaded behind a locked gate with Occupy and Resist spray painted on the door, checking their Instagram and waiting for the police to arrive.
The contrast is just,
Yeah.
It's staggering. On one hand, you have their 70-page Catholic manifesto, this very high-minded intellectual theological argument for why they are right and the rest of the world is wrong.
They feel righteous. They are convinced of their own truth. But on the other hand, the reality on the ground is broken windows, unpaid dog breeding fines, and the manipulation of elderly women.
It's a powerful lesson that you cannot intellectualize your way out of the simple command to love your neighbor. You can write 70 pages or 700 pages on why the Pope is a heretic, but if you are neglecting and exploiting the 90-year-old sister in the room next to you, you have missed the entire point of the gospel.
You've missed the heart of Christ. By their fruits you shall know them. It's the ultimate test. And the fruit here isn't peace or joy or love. The fruit is division, anger, chaos, and decay. It is not the fruit of the Spirit.
And it makes me think so much about this modern idea of truth. We live in a culture that's all about my truth. And in a way, that's what these nuns are saying. They're saying, we have the real truth, the pure faith, and we're protecting it.
But a truth that leads you to this kind of destruction, this kind of isolation, is it really God's truth? God's truth brings freedom, it brings light, it brings unity, even when we disagree. This truth has brought them nothing but darkness and ever-narrowing walls. It has made their world smaller, colder, and sadder.
And that's the question I really want to leave all of you with today. We all have moments in our lives, in our churches, in our families, where we disagree with leadership, where we feel things are going the wrong way. The question is, how do we discern?
How do we tell the difference between a righteous, necessary stand for conscience, like a Martin Luther, or the martyrs of the faith, and a prideful slide into dangerous, destructive isolation?
At what point does protecting the faith cross a line and actually start destroying the very community that faith was meant to build and serve?
And I think the answer has to lie in humility. Are we willing to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ? Are we willing to stay in the messy family? Or do we have to be the kings, or in this case, the abbesses, of our own little castles, even if those castles are crumbling into ruins all around us?
Brothers and sisters, as you go about your week, I would just ask that you pray for these women. Truly. Pray for the 7 sisters of Belorado. Pray for the elderly ones who have been moved, that they find peace and love in their final days. And pray for the church in Spain and all of us. It is a messy family, but it is the family God has given us.
Amen. Let us pray for restoration and for the softening of hearts.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. May you walk in peace, and may you always find the open door, not the locked gate. God bless you.
God bless.